Our next speaker, Carla Harris, is a senior client advisor at Morgan Stanley, internationally renowned public speaker, and author about how, and also what amazes me, she's even a singer. In her 30-year career, Ms. Harris has an extensive industry experiences in technology, media, retail, telecom, transportation, industrial, and healthcare sectors. And above all this, Carla's passion lies in helping others. She likes to say, quote, "We are blessed so that we can be a blessing to others." Love that. While climbing the corporate ladder, Carla also had her personal missteps amidst numerous victories. And she vowed that when she reached senior management level and people came to her for advice, she said she would provide them with the tools and strategies they needed for her own experience. Now let's tune into MetLife's global headquarters in New York City and give a warm welcome to Ms. Carla Harris, who shares her inspiring story with us, how she did it. Carla, over to you.
Well, thank you, Katie, for that introduction. And good morning, MetLife Triangle Tech X22. So, it's really a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank Robin and the rest of the leadership team for inviting me here and giving me an opportunity to spend a few minutes with you, especially to talk about how she did it. Now, there are a whole lot of ingredients to that recipe of how she did it, but this morning I'm going to focus on sponsorship in particular, because I know that you all spent yesterday talking about allyship and mentorship and sponsorship, and it is indeed and was critical to my success. And it was one of the big pearls, as I like to call them, my hard-earned and hard-learned pearls. It was one of the most important pearls that I acquired, because as I heard with Ellen and with some of the other speakers, I too bought this whole concept of a meritocracy. Every single company that came to Harvard Business School to recruit, whether it was financial services or not, all said, all you have to do is be smart and work hard, and you'll go straight to the top of our organization. And it did not take me long to realize that that was an incomplete success equation. So I love seeing the survey there, because I see many people that are online and in the room are at that mid-level. And it doesn't matter whether you are at the beginning, at the middle, or all the way at the, quote, pinnacle of your career, you will need somebody else's relationships in order to maximize your success. And I started coining the word sponsor back in 1990 when I was a third-year associate, because at that point, popular business press was just starting to talk about the fact that you needed a mentor. But nobody was talking about the fact that you needed a sponsor. You heard words like champion and advocate, but nobody was really talking about a sponsor. And some of you might have seen my TED Talk, but for those of you who didn't, let me tell you how I figured it out. Back in the day, it hurts me to say that, but back in the day, I started in 1987, the way Wall Street, and there were many other industries, evaluated people was through something called a round table. And the way the round table worked is that each level would talk about the lower level. So for example, the MDs would talk about the executive directors, which was known as principals at that time. The principals would talk about the VPs. The VPs would talk about the associates, and the associates would talk about the analysts, which was the entry level position. So now I'm a first-year associate. It's my first summer. I started in 87, so 88. This was the summer of 88. Right? So I go into the round table, I'm all excited because I see how the process works. And literally somebody, and I'm just going to throw out names, somebody said, you know, John Smith, and somebody said, superstar. The kid's a superstar. He walks through walls, has that fire in the belly. Fire in the belly was something they used to say a lot on Wall Street at that point. Had that fire in the belly, and yes. And there was a person that was recording, which I noted, and the person said, top bucket. So now the person says, Jane Smith, and somebody yells out, pretty good, you know, nice pair of hands, skills, solid soldier. Person says, middle bucket. Now the person says, Jim Smith, disaster. The kid doesn't have a clue. He's a beep show, blah, 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 blah. Going on and on and on and on about this person. Let's say, bottom bucket. And by that time, I was literally clutching my pearls saying, who's going to speak for me? That was my aha moment, because I realized that it wasn't as objective as I thought it was. Up until that point, I thought how I did it was a function of, the feedback that came from the deals that I was assigned, what the client said, what the internal team said about me. I really did think it was that black and white. I didn't understand this measure of subjectivity. And what I learned was that no matter what, if there is a human element at all in the evaluative equation, it cannot be 100% meritocratic, because meritocracy suggests full objectivity. Can't be. And think about all the ways that the human element comes into your day. Somebody assigns you whatever you're working on, in my case, the deal, but in your case, it could be the assignment. Somebody gives it to you. Somebody assigns the client. Somebody decides whether or not you're going to present or whether or not it's going to be your work. Somebody, all human element. And the other thing that I learned, and I wrote about this in my first book, this, what I'm about to tell you, was chapter 4, and it was the most important thing that I learned. The sponsors of chapter 5, and that is perception is the co-pilot to reality. How people perceive you will directly impact how they deal with you. So if you already think that I'm a superstar, the way you look at my work is going to be impacted. If you think I'm okay as a senior person, now you're going to drill down a little bit further when I turn it in, because you're not so sure. And if you think I'm a complete screw up, you're really looking at the work. And in fact, you may find things or think you find, or the least little thing, because you're looking for it, because you already have a perception about who I am. So all of those things impact the outcome for you and for your career. And these were some of my early learnings. So again, it was February of 1990. I'm at the University of Michigan Black Business Students Association, and I'm a third-year associate, and I'm so excited to say, let me tell you what I learned about being on the street so far. And sponsorship was one of the things that I talked about. Now, let me delineate, because I know that you had some definitions yesterday, so I'm going to give you my parlance. The advisor is anybody in your environment that has the intellect and or the experience to answer any discrete question that you might have. Oh, Robin, I'm going to be working with Forrest. Can you introduce me to him? I'd like to get to know him before we start this project. Oh, Michael, can you walk me through the weighted average cost of capital? I think you all do it a little differently than I did it at my old firm. Oh, Mary, can you walk me through my first client presentation? I don't want to miss any of our competitive arguments. Those are discrete questions. So anybody in your environment that has the experience or the intellect can answer that question for you, even about your career, what assignments you should take. This is what the culture is all about. That person you can give the advisor label in your life. The mentor, in my parlance, is the person you tell the good, the bad, and the ugly to. This is the person that you share the intimate details of your career with, your fears, your concerns, your mistakes, your triumphs, your strategies. I'm in this box, I want to be in this box. Who do I work and how do I get there? That person I call a mentor, but it means that person must know you very well and you must trust them. If I am just meeting Paul, I would argue that I cannot be a great mentor to him. I can be an outstanding advisor because presumably I know a little bit more than he does because we're in different age zip codes, right? So I might be able to tell him a little something differently because I've had more experience, and I might be able to answer almost any question, but I couldn't tailor it because I'm just meeting Paul. So I can give him great advice, but not specific to his personality, to his strengths, to his weaknesses, and that's what a mentor does. A mentor gives you tailored advice, tailored specifically to you and to your career aspirations. So if I know Corey and I know Paul, and they both want to become executive vice presidents, I'm going to give them two different strategies because they are two different men. And my job is to give them tailored advice that they can successfully execute. That's the person that wears the mentor label in your life. Now, the fact of the matter is, you can survive a long time in your career without a mentor, but you will not ascend in any environment without the sponsor. The sponsor, unlike the mentor, I said you tell the mentor the good, the bad, and the ugly. You want the sponsor focused on the good, and the good. Because this is the person that is carrying your paper into the room. All of the important decisions about your career will be made in a room where you are not present. Compensation decisions will be made in a room where you are not present. Promotion decisions will be made in a room where you are not present. And new assignments will be given out in a room where you are not present. So somebody has to carry your paper in the room and use their currency on your behalf to make sure you get the promotion, you get the great bonus, you get the next great opportunity. Make no mistake, this is the person that is spending their valuable political and social capital on you. And it doesn't matter if you are in a corporate environment or if you are an entrepreneur or if you are in a nonprofit. Somebody spends their currency on your behalf to get that donor to write the check. Somebody spends their currency to get that investor to invest in your company. Every scenario I can think of has a sponsorship element if you're going to maximize your success in that space. And that was a big aha for me, because it begs the question, how do you find a sponsor? And what I figured out is nirvana is when somebody says, look, Lauren, I'm going to take you under my wing and I'm going to make sure you're successful in this environment. That's nirvana. But oftentimes for women and people of color, it doesn't happen that easily. But you still have the opportunity to exercise your power and ask for a sponsor. So how do you identify a great sponsor? Well, I usually tell people to study their environment for about 2 weeks. Just study the environment for 2 weeks. And here's what you want to note. You want to note who are the people that have a seat at the decision-making table. Now, if you observe for 2 weeks and you can't figure that out, ask someone. It is just that simple. I went for a lot of years trying to figure out who's on the promotion committee, because every time around this time of year, people would start saying, the promotion committee is meeting today, and you're trying to figure out who that is. So one day, and this was several years into my career, I was up for a big promotion. I just asked this other female managing director, I said, who's on the promotion committee? And she said, come here. She took me into a conference room and sat me down, took a piece of paper and drew the table. And she said, here's who's on the promotion committee, and let me tell you where they sit. This one sits next to this one sits next to that one. And I thought when I walked away, boy, how easy was that? All I had to do was ask, but I never asked. Never really even realized that I could ask, without what? I look back now, I'm like, what did you think was gonna happen? If you asked, somebody was gonna tell somebody, Carla Harris asked, and, right? But back then, you're thinking, you have this narrative going in your head that you should not do that. But it was that simple. So study it, and if you can't figure it out, ask someone. The second thing, write them all down on a piece of paper. Second piece of paper, now you say, of all the people who are on the promotion committee, who are the people that have visibility into my work? Because the person has to have visibility into your work. They don't need to be your boss, but they have to have some visibility into your work because they need credibility in that room. If I go into the decision-making room and I'm pounding the table on Robin's behalf and everybody knows that I don't work with Robin, I have no credibility. And whatever it is I'm trying to get done, it won't get done for her. So the person has to have visibility into your work. That's the second sheet of paper. Third sheet of paper, now you say, of the people who have a seat at the decision-making table and to have visibility in my work, who are the 2 or 3 people I'm going to start to build a relationship with? Now you target the 2 or 3 people that you're going to try to build a sponsor relationship with. And here's the deal. Building a relationship in your professional life is so much easier than in your personal life, because it takes light touches in a professional environment before people feel like they know you. You would be surprised at how little interaction it takes before somebody says, oh, what do you think about Paul? And you know the response? Great guy, right? Because I've had some interactions with him. People are asking my opinion. I want to show that I know something, and all of those interactions have been pleasant. Great guy. Now, you may say that's not fair, But that's also one of the reasons that it makes sense for you to invest in the relationships around you, because you don't know who's going to get asked and you don't know when it's going to happen. So I've always been very conscious about my interactions with people. And I write about this in my new book, Lead to Win. When you are choosing to wear the leadership jersey, remember that you are being consumed. When someone is standing in front of you, they are consuming you. What would you like them to consume? You have the power at that moment to curate. Right then, you can curate the experience somebody is having with you. And it makes sense for you to do that throughout your career, not just when you're having the leadership jersey on. So ever since I was a younger associate, I kept thinking to myself, I want people to walk away from an experience with me feeling good about it, no matter what. That I wasn't cantankerous, I wasn't hard to work with, I wasn't just, one of those curmudgeons that no matter what, even if they didn't get what they wanted, they felt good about it. Let me give you an example. It's like talking to compliance, right? Right? I always wanted to make sure that compliance felt like she gets me, right? Because their job is so hard and everybody's like, oh, compliance, right? But I wanted to make sure that I'm like, I get you and I want you to get me, and they have a job to do that's all about legal, and I got a job to do that's all about commercial. So I'm gonna try to make that experience one where we feel like we both won, right? But it takes an intentionality around it. So it was the same thing with the sponsorship. I was very intentional because it wasn't happening naturally, but I did what I just told you to do, and I targeted the people, and I started investing in the relationships. And building a relationship is just frequency of touch, and it can be virtual touch or physical touch. So the more you interact, the more, voila, a relationship is created. And then that nirvana situation has a better shot of happening, and if it doesn't, now you can go to somebody, you can say, Corey, I know you guys are going to have this conversation today, and I consider you a sponsor, whether you know it or not. That's one strategy, just annoy him at the moment, right? And which I've also done. And I consider you a sponsor. You know me, you know my work, you know the client feedback. And here's why I want that opportunity. Here's why I think it would be great for the organization to allow me to do that. And here's why I think I'll knock the cover off the ball. Why did I say all of that? Because if Corey likes me, but he's not sure, I just gave him the narrative. So once he agrees to go in and spend his capital, I made it easy for him to help me because I gave him the narrative. So all he has to do is repeat what I told him. And the fact that I'm coming to him will give him a degree of confidence that I'm not going to let him down, because by coming, I am communicating, I understand what it means for you to spend your capital on me. And I'm not going to let you down. So that's one of the ways that you can do it. Once you have identified it, it's not happening naturally, you exercise your power and you ask for the order. Now, suppose Corey says, I don't feel comfortable doing that. Now you want to ask the second order derivative question. I respect that, Corey, but I really would appreciate if you can give me some color as to why, because that's going to help me figure out what else I need to do. I respect it, no pressure, but I really would appreciate the feedback. Now I'm making it easy for Corey to give me the feedback, because all of us work in environments that are non-confrontational. If people think it's going to be hard to give you feedback, they're not going to give it to you. They're just not going to do it, right? And that's one of the reasons historically it's been hard for women and people of color, because again, back in the day, people were deathly afraid that women would cry, right? And I think I know you guys are rolling your eyes at that, but trust me, the boys were afraid you were going to go, right in their office, and they were like, oh no, I don't want any of that, can't handle that, right? So they just would not really give you feedback, right? And then some would play into the stereotype of the angry black woman, right? Oh, it's going to be rough, right? No, you're doing fine, Carla. Just, keep going. But you have to create a space where people feel comfortable giving you the feedback, because you can't fix it if you don't know that it's broken. So now Corey says, well, Carla, I don't feel good about doing that because I just don't feel good. Well, if he doesn't give you a reason, then let me give you a gross generalization. There are 3 reasons that I believe people will decline your sponsorship. One is that you think they have the power to get it done. but they know they don't have the power to get it done. And they won't admit that to you in that conversation. Number two, they really don't think they know you well enough to be able to represent you well behind closed doors. Or three, they don't like you. They just don't like you. But that is important information for you. That's important information for you, because now you know you have some work to do to convert that person, or more importantly, that person may give you a sense of the noise that's in the marketplace about you. And there's always noise in the marketplace, good or bad, right? And you want the noise because you want to know what it is you have to clean up. And then you go on from there, and you know if Corey has said yes, he's going to give it his best try. Now, let me speak to some of you all that are sponsors in the room. I've talked to so many senior rooms where people are afraid to sponsor people. And the real reason they are afraid to sponsor them is they are afraid if they're going to let the person down. What if I don't get it, whatever it happens to be done? Well, the person, newsflash, the person is not holding you personally responsible for getting it done. They are holding you responsible for going in and giving it your best try. Getting in that ring, swinging as hard as you can. They are mature enough and aware enough that there are a lot of dynamics that are going on in that room that you won't be able to necessarily control. And they are also trusting that you're going to come out of that room and give them some color as to what happened and what they can do better the next time, and how you might be willing to stand with them over the next 12 months to try to make it happen. Because you too feel the fact that you didn't get it done, but you're going to try to help. I remember that there was somebody that I was trying to help get promoted, and I was pushing for them to get on the list and as a sponsor, and I had a lot of visibility into the work, and I knew I had a pretty big voice in the organization. But I also knew that there was going to be a lot of push against it because this was the first time that the person was up. And we sort of have a thing at the firm, if it's the first time, you can wait a little bit, right, if it gets tight in that room. But I was determined because I, again, knew how it worked. If they weren't discussed that year, then it might be 2 years. So the point was to get the discussion happening. Well, but I also told the person, again, full visibility, and to me, this is exemplary of a good sponsor. You say, Paul, I'm going to tell you now that it's going to be tight. And it's going to be tight for these 3 reasons. But here's my strategy. I'm going to go in and try to get it done, and I'm going to argue A, B, C, or D. You let me know if I'm missing anything. Are there any landmines? I talked about the sponsor knowing the good, but they should also know, where there might be some issues in that room so they don't get surprised. You never want your sponsor to get surprised. You want them focused, however, and passionate about the good, but not get surprised with ugly or bad. So you make sure and you tell the person what your strategy is going to be. It didn't happen. And I said, I knew we had a very slim chance of getting it done. But let me tell you what I learned. I need to get you in front of Paul. I need to get you in front of Corey. I need to get you in front of Josephine. And I need to get you in front of Rumkin. I couldn't quite see it. I need to get you in front of him, right, in the next 12 months. Because there are voices in the room that are highly likely to be in the room next year, and they don't know you very well. So they couldn't help on the vote, right? But that's my job. I'm going to make sure that that happens. Next year, they got promoted. So it's that kind of visibility. And I didn't say they stopped it. I said they don't know you that well. People need to know you. So I'm not giving away any confidences in the room, but I'm saying, this was my perception. More people need to know you. These 4 in particular, I don't think know you at all. I'm going to try to help there, right? Again, no guarantees that it's going to happen the next year, right? But this, I think, would be helpful. That's what your sponsoree is looking for from you as a sponsor. And I will tell you that sponsors change. As you get more senior, it really is important that you have 2 or 3 people that you can give that sponsor label to. Why? Because as people get more senior in the organization, they leave. And it has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with, it could be their personal life. It could be another offer, but they leave. So you never want to put yourself in a position where you are completely uncovered. So I call it sponsor, second seat sponsor, and sponsor in training. That's kind of how I think about the relationships, right? To make sure that I'm not completely uncovered. But let's say you only had one and your sponsor leaves. Now, don't forget, just because a person leaves the organization doesn't mean that they no longer have juice in that organization. Now you go to Lauren and you say, Lauren, I know you've left the organization. I'm very happy for you, but you and I both know that you were my sponsor. So I need to understand from you who you think I need to build that kind of relationship with, and who might even remotely do as good a job as you did for me and for my career. Now Lauren says, I'm gonna, I think you ought to call Sean, right? You don't have your name tag on. What's your name? Pawan. I think you ought to call Sean and Pawan, right? These are my guys. They know how much work you've done, and she's gonna call them first. So by the time I call them, they know why I'm calling them. You don't have to do the BS, and I just want to get to know you and all that. They know, right? Because she's called, right? And you still have to do the work to invest in those relationships so that they feel comfortable spending their currency on your behalf, because nobody spends their currency on somebody that they don't know. Nobody. You wouldn't do it. So why would you expect anyone else to do it? Right? So you still have to invest, but at least she's made that a warm call. So don't just think that you're left out there by yourself just because your sponsor leaves the organization. So that is, in a nutshell, how I've gotten it done. And even to this day, as somebody who stepped down from the vice chairman role and the managing director role and as a senior client advisor, I still need a sponsor, right? Because I'm a different kind of senior client advisor than the firm has seen. Most senior client advisors, go off into the sunset, and maybe they do something, once or twice a year, but I've had a full remit that I've had, and gave the firm a call on 50% of my time, which means I'm still, pretty engaged, but somebody has to be in there. I'm not in the room anymore. Somebody has to be in the room. So you never find yourself in any type of situation where you're not in need of a sponsor. And investing in those relationships are critical for you to do. And if you find yourself feeling isolated, that should be your wake-up call that you're not investing, that you're not getting out there. It's easy to default and put your head down and just continue to work, but that has diminishing marginal utilities, probably around 8 to 10 years into your career, because now everybody knows you're good, everybody knows you can deliver, everybody knows that you're smart. So what really makes a difference is the fabric and the strength of your relationships. When you're not in the room, what is somebody going to say? And you have to continue to ask yourself that, who's carrying my paper? And if you pause, then you need to go invest in a sponsor relationship. Now, I know, Robin, we said that we were not going to have any questions, but I did leave 3 minutes in case anybody had a burning question between yesterday, what you heard, and what you heard today. Okay. We're all good? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
So now with our current climate where, ourselves and like we're a hybrid organization as well as different others, how can you build those
Yes.
sponsorships when people are in the office at the time?
Yes, I was hoping somebody would ask me that question. So I am going to repeat. Yes, of course, I know. So for those of you who are in virtual land, the question is, now that we are really in a hybrid state in most organizations where some people are in the office, some people are virtual, and when people do come in the office, they come in at different times, how can you build those relationships? It is purely a function of your intentionality and your initiative, right? Because now you can kind of get a sense, especially if you invest and come into the office 1 week. Just come in 1 week so you can see, who's coming in, when are folks coming in, talk to the executive assistants so you can understand when the senior people are coming in and when they're not coming in. And if you desire to have a physical meetup with someone, then that's a function of sort of figuring out when they're going to come in and asking for that 15 or 20 minutes. But if that person is largely virtual, then that's even better, because now, getting a 10 or 15 minute Zoom with someone is just getting a 10 or 15 minute Zoom with someone, which is why I said it's a function of your own initiative. But you have to be intentional, because not all leaders have figured out how to manage hybrid environments. Right? And there are a lot of people, especially in my business, that want to default back to the way things were and, sort of giving a little bit of edge, if you will, for folks that are in the office versus virtual. But you have to think about what it looks like in your space and decide how you're going to invest. But just like you have to be intentional about investing in connecting if it was physical, you have to be intentional about connecting if it was virtual. Now, if it was me and I'm mid-level, I'm going for the virtual. Why? Because I know the senior person really won't do the virtual anyhow, right? Especially if it's Friday near tea time, girl, they appreciate that, okay? But if it is an old school, if it's an old school leader who does prefer the in-person, then don't buck the system. Go meet them and do a 15-minute coffee. And it's not going to take that much away from, your ability to be at home. Use the time. Say, I'm going in on Wednesday, and I'm going in because I'm going to meet with Carla, but I know Forrest is here. I know Robin is here. I know Jim is here. I know Chuck is here. So you know what? Wednesday is my go shake a hand day. That's what I'm going to do. And I'm strategic about it. This is how I'm going to do it. If I'm going to bother to go in, I'm not going in just to meet Carla. I'm going in to see how many other people, and even people that you don't know, pop in and say, hey, how you doing? When do you come in? I'd like to be able to have lunch with you, right? 5 light touches, light touches. And if people see you, what's the impression? You're interested. You're engaged. You showed up. Check, check, check. Remember, perception is the co-pilot to reality. How people perceive you will directly impact how they deal with you. And we're not asking for a big investment, 1 day out of 5. And so I don't understand people who have an issue with that when you were coming in 5 out of 5. 1? For you? Because it's all for you, right? So I think we made it. Thank you for the privilege and the honor.